So Mike had asked me to produce a provocation in 3 slides, and I hope the title that you're looking at there isn't too provocative. National curricula are failing geography. That isn't a statement about the Scottish national curriculum. It's based on the GA's experience largely in England and Wales over the past, shall we say, 35 years, and my own personal experience over the last 18 years working in England, Wales, and sometimes internationally, for example, in Vietnam and New Zealand. Why am I making this statement? It's not just to be deliberately provocative. You can see the first bullet point there, which is that, and this may reflect the experience in Scotland, what we have observed over the decades, and certainly in the last 10 years, are fairly centralised, increasingly centralised, sometimes politicised curriculum and qualification reform processes. In other words, in England, the view of the Secretary of State comes to dominate to an excessive degree, I would argue. That's not to say that education isn't a public good, or that educationalists shouldn't be held to account for what they're doing by the democratically elected government. This is more about the process as it plays out and the curriculum that results from that process. In other words, what we find in England, Wales and elsewhere is that the resultant curriculum doesn't tend to respect, is the word I would use, the distinctive nature of the subject. It doesn't really support curriculum development at the different levels at which it should take place. And I'll come back to that absolutely central point in a moment. So to illustrate then, rather than just use rhetoric, the 1991 curriculum for England and Wales was an exhaustive list of content. It didn't really point out for educationalists how the concepts of geography should bind that content together. The 2008 curriculum in England, which I worked on personally, I contributed towards, I wasn't its author, to be clear, swung the pendulum the other way. It was very, very clear and explicit about concepts, but it didn't really give teachers any sort of guidance as to how to mobilise those concepts in respect of content. The 2014 curriculum in England, as you're probably aware, is a stripped down list of core content. It gives very little guidance, none at all really, as to how that content should be sequenced, put together, and for its educational potential to be realised. So time and again, despite the GA's work and the work of many stakeholders, my contention is that national curricula continue to fail geography. In England, by the way, at the moment, and there were some parallels I was hearing over lunchtime here, the situation we have is that teachers are increasingly challenged, for example, by Ofsted, to design a coherent curriculum for themselves. Fantastic professional challenge, of course, but they don't have the curriculum to work from to do that. I'm just going to quote, if I have just about enough time, from my colleague Eleanor Rawling: the responsibility for the quality of the curriculum seems to be falling on schools and teachers. It's as if teachers in subject departments and as individuals are now being asked to compensate for poor curriculum development decisions at national or subnational level, and to develop all levels of the curriculum for themselves. So that's an unsatisfactory situation I'm describing. What I've also got at the final point on the slide here is from Phil Horden's work. He talks really about the importance of getting this right so that we can empower teachers in their professional roles as, yes, curriculum makers, but give them the tools to work and do that job properly. So what has the GA been doing about this problem that we've been talking about and identifying? For the last 2.5 years, we've been working with a wide range of stakeholders to create what we call a framework for the school geography curriculum. I've managed to drag a few of these up, probably enough for one print version per table. Happy to hand those out later. What is the framework? Well, it sets out the nature of the school subject. It sets out its disciplinary foundations and the significant features of geography that we feel should underlie any geography curriculum, or in fact, any curriculum which contains things within it that are labelled geography, or given that task, so to speak. So it's about how those requirements are expressed in curriculum terms. It's also about the educational potential of geography. And as you can just about see, I hope, from the diagram on the right, it's just a bit of a screenshot, sorry about that. The curriculum framework sits above that so-called national level, where the Department for Education would be designing the next national curriculum, for example. We have been working with DFE, Ofsted, exam boards, to try to convince people at all levels of that system, look, this is the job that you need to do, working with the framework, and here are some things that you don't need to do. Here are some things you can delegate to the next level down. And yes, it does look hierarchical, but we do need teachers involved at all those levels of the hierarchy. I think the main point I'm making is that sometimes what we have observed is that people overreach themselves. They produce national curricula which are either too stripped down, too detailed, or don't give the right sort of guidance to the next level. From government to awarding organisations, to publishers, and then to schools and teachers. And that is what we're trying to fix. I haven't got time, of course, to show you the contents. I've got a few copies here, and I'm happy to circulate a hyperlink via Mike. But just to give you one screenshot of what's going on in this framework. And here you can see, I hope, things that resonate with what was being talked about this morning. So yes, we have set out the conceptual architecture of geography in the school as we see it. We have also set out what we refer to as geographical practices, not just narrow skills or technical skills, but those broader sort of attributes and practices that geographers absolutely need to develop as they learn the subject. And critically, and I think this really connects with what I heard this morning, we have all set out the importance of geographical application. And I don't just mean a textbook with a few people with high-vis jackets and hard helmets. I'm talking about the intellectual process of thinking and deciding when and how geography, its content, its concepts, need to be applied in the real world, and the value of doing that. All of those things, in our view, are underpinned by substantive content, substantive knowledge, the stuff. The stuff alone is useless, the concepts alone are useless. It's the combination of those things which brings out the power of geography. And that is the work we are doing at the moment to try and persuade people in England and Wales to take account of this framework.